Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? My name's Adam Sanders. I'm Director of Public Relations with the National Payroll Institute, and I'm really glad to have you here today. Welcoming you to another live networking event on the 17thfloor.com. Those of you who are new to the 17th floor or maybe just getting your feet wet, the 17th floor is an online community that's bringing together kind of the human capital management space. So HR, accounting, and payroll professionals for peer-to-peer engagement, learning, mentorship, and so much more. So obviously this community is just taking its first steps, and we're so glad to have you here as we're doing so. Every 2 weeks, we're going to be hosting a live networking chat featuring special industry guests, as we are today, in which we and our members of the 17th floor are going to chat about experiences that help to uplift businesses and elevate the well-being of both employers and employees. Because, of course, as the engine behind businesses, employee kind of wellness and a strong relationship to employees leads directly to business wellness and kind of business health. So just why am I here? Because I'm not an expert on our topic today, which is kind of benefits philosophy and benefits plans. I'm here because the National Payroll Institute is sponsoring the 17th floor, and we're doing that because, again, we're focused on payroll, but we also know that the value of payroll is amplified and enhanced when we work closer with our colleagues in HR and accounting. And I think the inverse and the opposite is true. The more closely we work together and collaborate, the higher, the better, the further we'll go. So onto our topic today, which, as I mentioned, is benefits and benefits programs. And let's face it, companies can choose various strategies when designing their benefits programs. It's sometimes difficult to understand the actual needs of employees and then to create a financially sustainable program to match those needs, right? We'd love to give them everything, but there are business needs also, right? So employers, unfortunately, rarely sit down and take a comprehensive look at the employee benefits program. Often the program was implemented by someone else at another time in another kind of economic or business environment, or maybe where the goals of the business were different, the size of the business were different. So the question is this, what is your firm's benefits philosophy? To help us find out, we're joined by two luminaries and two experts in the area. Josh Ruiters, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It might be Reuters.
Ruiters, you got it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Anybody who knows me knows names are not my strong suit, but the other is Halton Hills, who, amongst many titles, is also a fellow of the FCPA, which is a fellow of the National Payroll Institute. So we'd love to have Halton here. Josh is a consultant who has been specializing in insurance and group benefit solutions for over a decade. During his 10 years in the industry, Josh has held roles and worked with some of Canada's largest insurance carriers, consulting houses, and third-party administrators. He, and I think this will be really clear, is passionate and believes that employees are the most important part of any organization. His primary focus is working with organizations to create a culture where employees feel appreciated and valued. Outside of work, Josh lives in Halton Hills, which, if you haven't been there, is one of the most picturesque areas in I'm going to call it the Greater Toronto area, but it's a little bit far to be the Greater Toronto area. But do go there, visit, and bring a camera. With his wife, Katie, and their 3-year-old daughter, Anna, Josh enjoys cooking, spending time outdoors, a great place to do that, and cheering for the Maple Leafs, maybe not so much after deadline day today with the free agencies, but we'll see.
It's hard to be a Leafs fan.
Wow, listen, it's about blind faith sometimes. Our other participant today is Halton Hills, a member of the Board of Advisors with the 17th floor, and of course, so much more. She's a seasoned manager and board member with truly in-depth expertise and experience in human resources, payroll benefits, pensions and investments, share purchase and corporate insurance programs for multiple countries around the world, including, as I learned today, places as far away, and I think this is about as far as you can get, Australia. So, we're really lucky to have these two here with us today. Now, it's going to be a bit of a free-flowing discussion. It won't be so much of me. I've talked too much already. But as we go through, please leave your questions in the comments, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, both throughout and then at the end. We have an hour for this discussion. It'll be a little bit free-flowing. We're going to let Josh and Catherine share as much of their expertise as they can. Josh, Catherine, are you ready? Shall we dive right in?
We're ready.
Shoot.
Awesome. Okay. So my first question is for you, Josh. A bit of a softball for you. Why should I reconsider my compensation strategy? Why is having one even important?
Ooh, I don't know. It's interesting because that is kind of a softball question, but I could actually take the rest of our hour to answer that question. So, long story short, I don't know that you should. I don't know that you should reevaluate your compensation strategy, but one thing I'm a big advocate of is having one in general. As you mentioned, a lot of employee benefits plans are inherited. Oftentimes I'm sitting with clients and their HR people, their payroll professionals, their finance people, and they'll say something like, we have this line of benefit. And then I'll ask a question about why do you have that? Or what was the motivation behind that? And they say they don't know. I started 3 years ago. I inherited this plan, and it's just always the way we've done it, right? It's funny because I hear that phrase, this is the way we've always done it, which is the most dangerous phrase in all of business. But you hear that so many times when it comes to group benefits, because depending on the organization size, depending on the complexity of the plan, it's an undertaking to revisit those group benefits programs. And a lot of times people have competing priorities, and it's, I'll cross that bridge another time because I'm going to worry about this thing right now. And then what ends up happening is, 7, 8, 10 years go by and they go, oh, our plan hasn't changed in almost a decade.
Yeah, I think one thing to do is when we used to do annual reviews for employees, I used to do a total compensation statement. And one of the things I did is I put the cost of benefits on there, contributions to the RRSP, your total compensation. I said, you know what? You're $100,000 engineer. You're really worth about 150 when you factor in all of the other things that I'm paying. So then they got it sort of more of the compensation strategy. It was more than just the money that they saw in their paychecks. And I think that was very educational for them.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, the moment we're in now, to some extent, with the changing nature of work, and I know that's a sentence that's almost lost its meaning at this point, but when you drill down, it's not so much that work has moved, to remote, which it has, but it's the nature of the relationship between employer and employee that's changed quite a bit. And of course, compensation is a really central figure of that relationship. So now might be the right time to consider it. Have you seen any, and maybe Josh again, have you seen any uptick in interest in looking at compensation packages in recent, let's say, months?
Yeah, it's interesting because to just go back quickly to something you just mentioned where you said, the changing dynamic of work, and really what's happening is people are bringing more home to work with them. It's not that they're bringing work home, they're bringing more of their home life to work. As we kind of mentioned before we jumped on this call, I'm in my office today so that you don't hear my dog barking and my wife on another call, as is usually the case when I'm at home. So what we're starting to see is something that we've always seen at Gallagher and something that we've taken very seriously, which is not necessarily looking at the employee as a worker, but looking at the employee as a whole person. And we're now starting to see that more and more as these two worlds are starting to collide. As you hear my dog barking and you hear my wife on the phone, you realize I'm a person outside of my little screen that I'm on. And employers and employees are starting to revisit that relationship because after 2.5 years at home, the idea of returning to work was met with some, well, hold on, how do I make the rest of my life work? I've just spent the last however long getting to this point, and now you want me to go back to the point I was at 2.5 years ago. So yes, compensation discussions have become far more prevalent because people are really reimagining what that relationship between employer and employee looks like. Add to that one of the most competitive job markets that we've ever seen here in Canada. And oh my goodness, the amount of people who have called me and said, we want to look at our benefits plan. We want to make sure our benefits plan is getting better, or we want to invest in the benefits plan. We want to make it, more competitive. And that's where I tend to bring our benefits philosophy to the discussion. Because if you were to just say to me, I want a better car, if I don't know your car, how you bought it, why you like your car, it's very hard for me to make it better without just saying, well, it's a Ferrari, so here you go. So it's having that conversation and understanding what better means to the organization. So yeah, we can take a look at your benefits, but why? What do you want? What's your goal?
And great. And that's a fantastic jumping off point for where I wanted to go next. And Catherine, maybe we can start with you, because I think as a payroll professional, you'll have a unique perspective here. Josh mentioned the idea of competitiveness. And of course, in a competitive job market, competition is can be a key differentiator. So how can you evaluate? How do you know if your benefits program is competitive in the first place?
Well, I remember one time when we were doing an annual renewal, our benefits broker actually created a table for us that looked at, I think, 20 comparable firms in our marketplace that they actually serviced, and just built the table for us to show us, here's your benefits plan and here's everybody else's. So we were able to, get a strong feeling that, hey, wait a minute, we got 3 times life insurance, for salary or something. So that was very informative. And then when we talked to employees, we said, well, what do you really want? We sort of did a little sort of discussion with different people to ask what they were looking for. And I think the tricky part is the multi-generational thing we're dealing with these days. You've got people that are 20 in your workforce, and I had people that were 70 in my workforce. So right there and then, it's pretty hard to get a standard benefit plan that's going to make everybody happy. So we went to more of a healthcare spending account, which allowed the employee $1,200 to spend the way they wanted to. Okay, so the guy that wanted glasses at 70 and the 20-year-old that wanted, his wisdom teeth removed, they could spend that flex spending money and meet their needs. So that's one way of making your benefits plan attractive to your employees. And, and then it's always the cost involved in doing that. But at least that way, the flexibility was there. I think that's important from an employee perspective, because you can't all be equal in terms of your requirements.
Catherine, can I ask a question about that program? Did you do the health spending account in working with a traditional benefits program, or did you replace the traditional benefits program with a health spending account?
No, we had the traditional benefits program. And then what we had done is we had looked at what benefits we weren't using. So we had phased out, for example, the private healthcare room, which we had $35,000 worth of premiums being paid. And we had, I think, $2,946 used. So I said to the broker, well, that seems like a lot of premiums we're paying, not much benefits. So out of the 400 employees I had, like 2 people had used it. So when we went to healthcare spending, we now had 400 employees enjoying the benefit of tax-free benefits coverage. So it just made much more sense. And we were very careful in our education program to say, look, we phased this benefit out. The reason we phased it out was this: it's not being used. Because 9 times out of 10, you get to the hospital door, and how many chances are you going to get a private room? So it's very slim usage. And then when they told the employees they could have $1,200 of spending money, well, heck, that went just over like, a balloon fest, because they thought, great, I can go out and get those new glasses. I can go out and get that new thing.
Absolutely. So just a follow up, because you mentioned, the 70-year-old looking for glasses, and the 20-year-old getting their wisdom teeth out. And, as somebody who's done that in recent years, I feel sorry for the 20-year-old. That's not my question. My question was really about, it sounds like you'd be in favor of dividing kind of employees into groups so that the plans are appropriate for them, because I can imagine at different life stages it might be
beneficial. See, Yeah, no, but that's what the healthcare spending does. It really gives them a base level of coverage and then gives them the flexibility. So I don't think segregating them into groups would be my preference. I think having the flexibility for them to use their spending money the way they have to use it and where they need to use it. So the guy going for the wisdom teeth can get, 80% covered. Then that other 20%, he could walk to his healthcare spending account and get that covered. So it allows the flexibility between any age group. So you're not, because otherwise you're kind of finding that your director levels, et cetera, are probably going to be likely the older part of the organization age wise. So I think having that healthcare spending account is provides great flexibility.
And of course, with 40 being the new, or 70 being the new 40, as it were,
Yeah.
it's hard. Like those kind of stereotypes that you'd have to rely on, or those archetypes, would be awfully tough to hold people to.
Yeah, no, I found it went over really, really well. I mean, it was definitely an education program. And I think that's the biggest thing with benefits. I like to have pilot groups, just sit in a room with them and say, okay, if we gave you 10 choices on the wall, what one would you want and why? And then you get a little more insight into their perspective of things. So I think that's a good way to treat it. Because I mean, you and I always, look at it a certain way because that's our ingrained background in payroll, benefits, HR, whatever. But if you're, a new engineer that just graduated from the 7-year co-op program, you probably go to the dentist once a year, so that's probably not going to be your priority. But, if you want to get those braces at $6,000, I mean, I got tired of telling them how to make the braces program work. So I just wrote the sheet up, said, okay, start with your plan, then go to your spouse's plan, then come back to the healthcare spending account. So after about the 10th time I told somebody that, I just wrote it up. So when they came into my office, it was like, you're going to the dental plan? Oh, yeah, I got that one here. So I think Absolutely. It's understanding, how your benefits can help you and what's covered and what's not covered. Because then you go in with an educated, if I'm going into hospital, I know, okay, I get a coverage for a standard room. I can use my healthcare spending to pay for my private room, if I get one. So it's really a matter of what you want to use your money on and what's most beneficial to your family.
So, and thank you for that, Catherine. I just want to take a step back a little bit because, Josh, you earlier you mentioned an idea, something called a benefits philosophy, and I want to just pause on that for a minute. Can you just help us understand first what is a benefits philosophy? Because I think that's might be a new term or a new idea. It is for me, but yep. I'm certainly not an expert. But also, if you were going to start constructing a benefits philosophy for any organization, where do you start? What's the question you try to answer, or what's the first thing you need to do to start getting to what an organization's philosophy is?
Absolutely, and it's interesting because it touches on a lot of what Kathy had just mentioned that she did within her organization recently. So the idea of benefits philosophy is basically, let's just figure out what you want from the program as an organization. Let's figure out what your employees want from the program as an organization of employees. And then let's start understanding what aspects are going to be important to your organization and to your employees. So it kind of touches on a lot of the stuff that Catherine had mentioned in her previous experience. But one of the things that we always look at is, do you want a flat plan? Do you want like just the standard plan that everybody's going to have? Or do you want some flexibility within that? Do you want to have a flex benefits program? Did you want to have that sort of flat benefits program combined with a healthcare spending account? And then what I tend to do is start having these conversations with my clients so that I can get an understanding of what they think would work for their people. Oh, we really like this, people like that. And I also premise this by saying I couldn't have agreed with Catherine more. No matter what, all of these discussions should involve asking the employees, polling the employees, sending them surveys, asking them what's important to them, looking at their data to see, how I might think I want a private room insurance, but then when we go and look and realize that nobody's using it and I'd much rather have a healthcare spending account with those dollars, that's very important. So it's asking those employee questions. But once we get past, flexible and traditional benefits, because there is a plethora of different organizations and carriers and programs and plans out there that are tailored towards employee choice. And it can be minor choices down to, subtle coverage differences all the way to a la carte menus where you're given a healthcare spending account and a certain amount of those dollars are allocated towards buying coverages. So in terms of wanting a flexible plan, there's never been more options for people than there is now. And it's definitely worth something exploring, but it's internally, your organization needs to know how you view benefits. Do we want a program that allows people to choose and maybe choose something that serves them better, but might not be as, what's the word I'm looking for? Protective. Like, for example, if you gave that 20-year-old the option for more healthcare spending, he might pass up all of his prescription drug coverage. Well, as an organization, I don't want him to quite give up all of his prescription drug coverage. So it's giving them that flexibility and that choice within the framework of the benefit spirit, which is making sure that your employees are happy, healthy, and well taken care of. So when they come to work, they're not worried about financial stress, physical health, or toothache, any of those sorts of things. Yeah. So from flexible and traditional, then another conversation starter I'll have is, do you want a very simple plan or do you want a diverse, complex plan? And there's benefits to each, right? A simple plan is kind of your very basic, go to a big carrier, get combo number one. Basically, you just say, I have 5 employees. What do you have for me? And they'll say, we have this very generic standard package. Not a lot of choice, not a lot of bells and whistles, but it's simple. Everything's here. Here's how you use it. Bigger organizations, and as you find organizations grow, they tend to get more complex benefits programs. When you start talking about hundreds and hundreds of employees, maybe it makes sense to start using multiple carriers, because one carrier is really going to meet your needs and serve you well in life insurance. And another one might be the best bet for travel insurance. But in that kind of diverse, complex environment, you have the ability to pick and choose carriers. So that's, again, these sorts of things are conversations I like to have with my client, because everybody loves the idea of all these choices with all these different carriers. But maybe your team internally doesn't have the bandwidth or the strength to manage that sort of program, or you don't want to have people coming to ask you questions all the time about their flex benefits program and how all that works. And so again, understanding what the client wants, what the employees want, and ultimately what's available in the market is what's going to kind of shape this discussion. The other one that is a very, worthwhile discussion, and I find that this tends to involve a lot more people than just the benefits broker and the plan administrator. And it touches on what Catherine had mentioned earlier, being competitive within the industry. So one of the things that we always discuss is, do you want your plan to be competitive or do you want to be a leader? So if I were to think about competitive plans, it'd be like the one I have here at Gallagher. If I was to think about a leader plan, it would be maybe a teacher, right? Like a teacher's benefit program is, the gold standard when it comes to employee benefits in terms of what's covered, what's not, flexibility, all that sort of stuff, and cost too. It's an incredibly expensive program, but that's the kind of gold standard, quote unquote, that people look to when they think about group benefits programs, government programs, those sorts of things. Yeah. Well, a lot of organizations would have a hard time meeting those needs or meeting those, the cost that it would cost to run a program like that. So with that being said, do you want to be competitive? Do you want to be a leader? Where do benefits fit to your overall employee strategy? And the reason I say that is I'm going to give you a kind of a good example of that. So when deciding whether or not you want to be a competitive benefits program or a leader in the benefits space for your particular industry, let's just say, one of the questions that we often have is by line item, right? Do you want to be the best life insurance company? Do you want to be the best LTD insurance company? But the reason I'm kind of touching on these things is if we step back, we can take a look and say, okay, if we've decided that we're not going to be the teacher's program, we're not going to have that sort of benefit arrangement, but what we really want to do is focus on a few key areas and make them really impactful for our employees. Well, how can we then, work with other stakeholders in our business to achieve other business goals using that mindset? And the reason I say that is in Toronto, we have a booming tech business, right? There's startups all over the place. There's venture capital firms starting new businesses, success stories all across from, around the world. Organizations like Shopify that grew in the Toronto ecospace and grew and grew and grew. That particular industry is really focused on being inviting to ladies. And a lot of those organizations want to see more women in their workforce. So what we've found, or what I've seen, is a lot of those tech companies are really deciding to be leaders in benefits that would matter more to ladies typically than men. Like, for example, mat leave programs, extensive sick leave programs, so that, if somebody's child's home and sick, they can take care of them. So again, it's just looking at how can I use this benefit program to further along and get us where we want to be. And I've talked a lot there, so I'm going to give you guys a break before I go through the rest of the whole philosophy stuff.
No worries. It's all good information. We really appreciate it. I wanted to follow up just with Catherine, because there was a discussion a little bit there about single providers and multiple providers. But I think, Catherine, you're going to have a unique perspective here because, in your time working in payroll, or, a large part of your work would have been interfacing with employees directly, not with administrators. So is there any worry or caution around confusion or lack of understanding of benefits that occurs when you do have multiple providers? Is that a barrier to people actually taking advantage of their benefits that they could be?
Well, it's interesting because in Canada, I had one provider that did all my benefits program and my RSP program. So the employee had one sign-in, and they could find out anything they wanted about what claims they had, how much money they had in their RSP. And on the flip side, in my U.S. office, we had the exact opposite, where we had 5 or 6 different carriers. Even your flexible spending account in the U.S. was with a carrier. Your dental was with another one. Your health was with another one. The 401k was with another one. So administratively wise, and just trying to keep your benefits paid and the billings, it was obviously more challenging. Like every time I ran payroll, I had to make sure I uploaded the 401k donations, etc. So I think from an employee perspective, I think the one carrier, as long as the plan is good, I think it's more simple and more appreciated by the one person can sign on and see everything they needed to see about their sort of benefits and RSP all in one place. In the US, it's fairly common for that to be multiple carriers. So I found that challenging. I only had maybe 40 employees in the US, but it took me more time to do the benefits in the US than it did for 400 people in Canada. So I think from an employee perspective, it's easier if it's one location, because then you're dealing with the same person all the time on the same issues. You can pick up the phone to one person and say, I want to talk about my dental benefit. Well, gee, I want to ask a question about my health benefit. And you're dealing with one person versus me saying, okay, I get a call from the US employee. Well, I want to talk about my dental, my health, and my 401k. I said, okay, well, here's the 3 1-800 numbers. Good luck. You know what I mean? I can't answer them. And I became more familiar with the plan because I happen to be in the plan in Canada. So, I knew exactly when they said, I didn't get covered for X. So I'd say, okay, that's because of Y. I was able to get better education, where in the US, I wasn't really involved in the plan as much. And then we rolled out to Australia, and I was very surprised when they said, we don't give health or dental benefits to any employees. I was like, what? They don't. Like they in Australia, the practice is normally for the employee to go purchase their own plan. So I found that very strange. And then we went to Germany, and they had whole combinations. When I saw the first pay stub, luckily I got the German version and the English version. And here's the state taxes and the church taxes and all that. So I'm thinking, okay, we're looking more like the shades of the US in terms of the number of different taxes and stuff. So really, from my experience of all those different countries, I think the one in Canada with the one plan, from an employee comprehension point of view, is more easy for them to understand and easy for them to deal with when they're only having to deal with one person, for example, on one topic. They can call up and ask 6 questions.
Yeah, absolutely. As a communicator, which is my area, I completely agree, Catherine. Like, simplicity of message and easy to understand really helps people take advantage of what's being offered here. And let's face it, yes, I know that overuse can cause increased premiums, things like that, but employers really do want their employees to take advantage of the benefits. They don't want it to go unspent. That aside, I just want to shift gears a little bit because, Catherine, you obviously have fantastic international experience, and how the timing of that. In our world today couldn't be better. We just did some research not too long ago that found that throughout the pandemic, we all saw the photos on Instagram or TikTok, if you're on it, of everybody working from the beach. Well, we found out not everybody was working from the beach. In fact, only 1 in 10 had gone out of the country and worked from somewhere else. But 4 in 10 are interested in doing so in the near future. That's not an insignificant number. But I also know that from a pay and benefits perspective, it makes things much more complicated. So, Catherine, can you just speak to a little bit how does an employer handle benefits programs for employees working in another jurisdiction other than the province in which they're the business is located? For example, Ontario, if they're working in Quebec, or even Ontario and they're working in, let's say, Antigua Barbuda.
Yeah, I think, and there's been a lot of questions about this over the last 2 years. I know, when they first started and somebody wanted to go home to Africa for 4 months, so you kind of said if they were less than 6 months, normally a lot of the carriers have kind of a policy of how many days, they can do this kind of stuff, which I think, first of all, discussing it with your carrier to make sure the coverage is in place is the first thing before you let the person get out of the office and make their arrangements. I mean, I had guys going to Australia for a year. So then we're now into, international payroll, and pay exchanges and tax exchanges. So I think that the big thing to do is to get all the facts down, talk to the, expatriate CRA people and say, okay, I've got a case of, Johnny going to Australia for 6 months and he's, his wife is pregnant. And so, what type of coverage can I get for them? Because again, I had the similar case of an employee we hired from Australia to come to Canada for a year. And so he arrives out the door, walks to my office and says, yeah, did I tell you that my wife was pregnant? And I'm looking at him going, oh, that could be a challenge. So, I mean, when you bring someone on temporary, normally your benefits plans aren't really designed for that. So, I mean, we had to end up getting him a separate plan, So I think get all the facts down, talk to the different professionals, and every case will be different because it depends how long they're going for. I know sometimes we get employees that say, well, I want to take, a 6-month leave because I want to go hiking at Machu Picchu, in Argentina. And I'm going, okay, for the first 60 days, as long as you're using your vacation, you're great. But once you get off of that, the carrier does not want to take the risk associated with having somebody doing, skydiving in, Australia. So, usually have to go when they make these requisitions to let them understand what they're covered for and for how long. Then I reach out to my benefits broker and say, who's that guy in Montreal that writes policies for anything? And then I'll just share that with them. I'll say, listen, for the time that you're not covered with our plan, I recommend you look at some plan like this just to make sure your thing. So, get professional advice. And of course, I suggest putting in writing because sometimes when you get a CRA ruling, you want to make sure that you've given all the facts to them and that you've got the ruling for that particular person. So that you're not offside on the CRA and they don't get a big surprise at the end of the year.
Perfect. So I'm just I know we're about halfway through. Josh, do you have any thoughts on international benefits?
All I can say when it comes to that regard is I am by no means an expert on international benefits, but what I would encourage everybody to do is reach out to your current benefits broker or whoever you're working with when it comes to your insurance program. Like, obviously contact your carrier as well, like Catherine said, but really reach out to your broker. Because I know for myself, the reason I don't know a ton about employee benefits and international benefits is because within my organization, I actually have a team that handles that. So, my clients could call all the carriers they want and ask all the questions they want. If they were to call me, I would simply say that's a Michael Clark question, and I would introduce you to Mike, and he would be able to take you, like, whether it be actually having them there for 6 months, or if you want to actually hire just an Australian person to work at your Canadian organization, that's an option as well. So that's what I mean to say. Like Catherine said, ask as many people as you can, because there might be somebody who has a resource available to you that you didn't realize was available to you.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Catherine, when you are paying somebody internationally or providing benefits internationally, there are complex payroll and tax implications also that have to be kept in mind as a business. So again, I would, I'm speaking here as somebody working with the National Payroll Institute. Consult your payroll professionals because they can help you manage that.
Yeah, no, and I think the visas too. I mean, I can't tell you the number of visas I've done, and like you're getting this guy to get on a plane to come from Australia for 6 months, and he's filling out the visa, and then he answers the question, have you been charged before? Yes. And you're like,
Fair enough.
He's going to arrive at the gate and they're going to put him back on the plane to Australia. So we got down on the bottom of it, so we have to be careful and pay attention, to make sure they're going to, and it was even as the advisor said, okay, my suggestion is never come through the airport on a holiday Monday, for example, come through on she was down to that level of telling us,
Sure.
to get this person through, some suggestions, and give her my phone number. And they stopped 2 of our trainers one time. We had an individual here in Canada that had a heart attack. And so we had 2 trainers from the US, and we had a whole week course planned. So we asked them to come up and teach the course. And they get to the airport and they're like, well, no, you don't have a work visa and everything. We're like, okay, call this number. And so they called this number, and it was funny because the people at the airport, the 2 girls could hear them. They go, oh, they called so-and-so. So I think, so it was kind of funny because obviously this person was well known in the industry. And within 3 hours, she had just talked to the people at customs. Okay, what do you need? This paperwork? Yeah. This work visa? Yeah, no problem. And within 3 hours, she had them out of there. But they sat there for a total of 8 hours. And meanwhile, we've got 25 people arriving for a course. And we're going, okay, this could be a little tricky. So yeah, the importance of making sure you've got all your ducks in order when you're bringing people into the country. Just make sure you do it ahead of time and have it reviewed. So there's nothing worse than having somebody flying from Australia and get told they have to get on a plane to go back home.
Yeah. Now, I do have a feeling, Catherine, that was pre-pandemic, because now we would have just done it by Zoom and
exactly.
Yeah. No, and it's okay, we're moving, Brian and his 3 kids and his wife to Australia. Do you think you could find him a place to live? Oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine flying from Ottawa and being turned away. I'd be furious. So imagine at the end of an Australian flight. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, no, I did that Australian flight when my son was working for Team Canada when he played. And I remember going into the the Australian office and going, okay, I'm here. Now, if you've got any issues, I'm right here. I'm here to talk to you in person.
Yeah.
We could go on and on, I guess, about troubles at airports right now, but let's stay on track here. Let's not get off the rails, because I'm passionate about, we're all passionate about it, but we're also passionate about benefits. And we do have a question from the audience, from I believe it's Louis or Louis Richards, depending on how they pronounce their name. And really, they're getting to the idea. I worked once upon a time tangentially with somebody who had a saying, "Nothing good is free." Well, for most employees, benefits seem free. I know they're not, but there's also this idea of maybe having employees pay into their benefits and feel that a little bit. So, Josh, maybe I'll start with you here. What are your thoughts? Some employers make their employees pay for part of their benefits plan. What are the advantages, disadvantages, big watch outs, those sort of things?
Absolutely. It's funny because that's actually one of the benefits philosophy's tenets that I didn't get to cover, which is how much, if any, do you want your employees to pay, right? And that's the discussion that we're going to have with every business owner. There's pluses and minuses. Obvious benefit is employees appreciate not having to pay anything out of pocket. They view it as much more of a benefit. It's not something they bought. So there is some value to that. The challenge without them seeing what the benefits plan costs or understanding or paying that price to a certain extent is they assume everything's free. So when somebody says something like, oh, this one drug is $100,000, they go, that's great, I'll take it. So without it just kind of, they're not as invested in the program when they don't have any skin in the game, so to speak. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is when you charge employees for their group benefits, they view it as something they paid for. And so if you were to charge me, I don't know, $500 a year for my benefits program, I might take the opinion that I need to use at least $500 of it for it to make sense for the money that I put in, which in turn leads to maybe people using or getting claims or filing claims that they might not otherwise would have done. And so that's the fine balancing act between, again, keeping employees invested in the program so that they realize it's very much not free, but also not creating that sort of, I need to drive value for my dollars. mindset. And the way that I tend to address this is where it is possible for the employees to, where the employer can pay for the employee benefits, my suggestion is just pay the whole 100% of the benefits, but make sure that there's co-pays within the program built in, because that's what's going to impact behavior. And the reason I say that is, regardless of whether I paid anything for the premiums, if you were to come to me, and this is a real world case, eczema for the last 50 years has been treated by a cream that costs something like $150 every time you fill it, a jar 4 times a year. So basically, if I'm somebody with eczema, it's about $800 to $1,000 in prescription drugs to manage that eczema over the course of the year. About 5 years ago, there was an oral tablet that came out that treated eczema. And basically, I took one pill every day, and I never had to put the cream on. I never had to worry about having an eczema outbreak. But that pill cost $4,000 a year. So if the employee is paying either any of the premiums and not paying for the actual benefit themselves, if you were to say to me, do you want to replace cream with a pill? I'd say, sure, of course. Why wouldn't I want to do that? And so I would take that. Whereas and that would cost me money on premium share down the line. Whereas if you put me at 80 or 90% coverage on that prescription drug, and so I was paying $15 or $100 a year for my eczema cream, and somebody says, well, hey, Mr. Josh, your 20% of this $4,000 is going to start looking a lot more like $800 a year. I go, well, start telling me more about the efficacy of that cream versus that pill. And so those are definitely key considerations of, why employees sometimes do either co-pays or cost shares.
Yeah, I think the key one, though, I like to make sure is that the employee pays for LTD so that
Of
it's
course.
tax-free when they receive it. So when I first joined the company, I had this, $54 added to my paycheck. And then I had the same $54 deducted. So what happened is when I guess they brought in a new program, they didn't want, they had paid 100% of the premiums. And so what they did is they actually gave the employees a bonus equal to the deduction. But I said to them, yeah, but you're still going to pay tax on that bonus. So it's not quite a full wash. But the employees never understood that until you deal with the employee when they're getting, at 55, they ended up with a stroke and are not going to come back to work. And now they have 10 years of, full 80% of salary sort of thing, tax-free sort of thing, So I can tell you that there's some pretty happy campers when that happens, in the sense that they have a real sense of security. So I think that's the only benefit that I think is critical, that you get the employees to pay.
It's interesting because I'll tell you a quick personal anecdote about LTD insurance and paying your own premiums. We were talking earlier about the 20-year-old employee and how they want their wisdom teeth out. I was 22 years old and I was working my first job. My LTD was entirely employer paid, being completely unaware of the tax implications. Our company got purchased by another company and we got adopted onto the new benefits program. And basically, same idea. I went from paying $0 to LTD to $32 a month for LTD. As a 23-year-old who was furious about that $23, and I mean, transition from a small mom and pop shop to a purchase, there was some animosity, let's say. So I actually went to my version of Catherine. Her name was Carlene at the time. And I said, I'm not paying $32. Like, you might as well, you guys have just given me a pay decrease because I'm now making $32 less every month than I did. I'm not doing that. I'd like to opt out of this insurance. And Carlene said, that's not how it works, buddy. Beat it. Luckily for me, because about 4 months later, I fell playing soccer, broke my wrist, and it was somewhere I had broken my wrist before. Long story short, I needed an operation and I could not work, and I was off work for 10 months. And I relied entirely on that LTD program. It was actually that experience that got me into the insurance space, because I went, oh my God, if somebody hadn't told me that stuff, I would have talked my way into the homeless shelter, because I wouldn't have had any money in the 10 months that I was working. I would have had to been 22 moving back into my mom's basement, which is the absolute last thing I would have wanted at that time.
So I just, we're going to ask a couple more questions. We have 15 minutes left, but I did want to encourage those with us in attendance to submit questions. We are going to take a few, as many as we can, live. If you're watching this after the chat ends on the 17th floor, Definitely add questions into one of the forums, and I'm sure as a community we'll get to those as well. So I just wanted to, so my kind of penultimate question, second to last, is this. We've talked about these being different times. So, what's changed? What benefits are popular today that maybe weren't a couple of years ago? What's hot right now? What's the trendy benefit that we want, that people might want to look at? Josh, maybe I'll start with you, since you're, I think, actively managing those kind of questions.
The main ones are kind of the sort of things you expect. I'm getting a lot of questions around mental health. We're getting a lot of questions around healthcare spending accounts. But the main thing that, those are like line items. The main trend that I'm seeing when it comes to employee benefits is almost automation. And when I say automation, it's people want good user experience. Employees want good user experience. That to them is the biggest thing. If an app sucks, people will complain about it, even if it's the best coverage on earth. So that's one of the big trends I'm seeing now. Is I'm finding I'm having more conversation about user experience than I am actually about the coverage that user experience is about. But the other thing is digital. Everything's digital enrollments, digital enrollment forms, DocuSigns. We used to make the joke 5 years ago that we were still one of the only industries that required paper signatures. And luckily for us and everybody else, COVID changed that. And so what we really are seeing is people are saying, like, I'm fine with switching carriers, but I'm not going to collect 255 signed enrollment forms again. So when we go to move, let's move, but let's figure out, use all those enrollment forms or not do some of the manual work that we've been doing in the past.
Okay. Catherine, any thoughts on, anything that people might want to pay attention to now that they might not have in the past?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had, when we were having a discussion a little while ago about the whole benefits, one of the things we did at one point is we had AD&D. And in discussing this with a group of people at the office, I said, well, the AD&D program tends to benefit like the spouse if something happens to the carrier or to the employee. And so we ended up looking at the cost because the cost kept rising, and we had, life insurance as well. And we ended up phasing out the AD&D program and bringing in an employee assistance program. So now I had 400 employees, all their family members benefiting from from this benefit versus a possible spouse of somebody that had lost. So it's really, you have to look closely at who your benefits programs are benefiting. Because as I said, I've got, co-op programs coming in the first year. And I remember doing an orientation when we first went under COVID, and, doing the orientation for these 22 co-ops that are starting on a Monday morning. And, and we'll have the RSP, and the guy's going, what's an RRSP? And I'm like, okay. So I think, as I said, education. So I think making sure that employees know what they're getting. So like maybe have lunch and learns or a healthcare fair every once in a while to make sure that the employees know the benefit. Because if you think about it, benefits money is tax-free. So if I go to that, get my, major dental work done, I get 80% covered. The other 20% is coming with after-tax dollars versus a healthcare spending account, which is going to be before tax dollars. So it's, it's worth more money in their pocket. So I think that's where you have to promote that with the employees. And, if you tell them, yes, they want to get, massages because they both do, ultimate frisbee, their backs are killing them. And then they've got a child with a back problem. So, there's so much more flexibility for that. So I think these days, it just depends what the family's doing and where they are in their life cycle and what necessary, like, as you said, you might have somebody that needs, walking guidance, for example. So that's sort of a benefit you can get, coverage for those people if they have the right availability under the benefits plan. So it is a definite diversity to your age population to really focus on which benefits are more valuable to you.
Sorry, Josh, go ahead, please.
Oh, if I could just add to that, because it's a point Catherine's made a couple of times, and I haven't been able to jump in and really hammer it home. But one of the biggest things that an employer can do to drive value in their benefits program, and this is what benefits philosophy is all about, is clearly communicating it to the employees, right? The reason I say have a benefits philosophy is so that when an employee comes to you and says, why isn't this covered? You have an answer, not just, I don't know, nobody looked at it. We said, no. The reason this AD&D isn't covered because we wanted to make sure that we were covering you and not your family and and all the reasons that Catherine outlined. But by having a good philosophy in place and then having a strong communication strategy in place as well as that, it drives so much value, because oftentimes people look at their employee benefits when they're starting a new job, or when they have something that's kind of gone sideways for them and they're trying to figure out the resources available to them. Well, a lot of stuff is proactive. A lot of stuff that you can share with your employees, they don't even know they have. So don't let somebody else go and tell your employee how good an EAP program if they already have one at your organization, right? So employee communication, I can't stress that enough. Every time you start talking about communication, Catherine, I'm like nodding my head as seriously as I can, because that is one of the key tenets. None of what we talk about matter if employees don't understand how benefits work, what they get, and how they're protected by it. And it comes down to that total comp statement you guys did that you were talking about, where you listed the RSP. That's amazing. We have a program with that at Gallagher, and there's a few of us who are just crazy about it, and the other people just haven't found it yet, because it's amazing. And for employee engagement and driving value for the plan, nothing is more important.
Yeah. I think that's important too, because a lot of employees will come in to me, and I'm an engineer and I'm only making 120,000. My buddy's making 140. And I'll say, okay, go back and get your total compensation statement where you got paid out $10,000 for the overtime you worked. You got paid out $20,000 for your profit sharing. I paid all your benefit costs. So how much are you making now? I said, talk to the employee to see what they actually got on their T4 and what they got covered. Because then they go back and they go, oh yeah, I guess he's paying like $75 a paycheck for benefits, and he doesn't have profit sharing, and he's not getting paid overtime. And I said, okay, so now we're talking, apples to apples here. So, you have to really make sure they understand what compensation is, because it was just one of those things that, how your company operates might not be the same as how another company operates, especially you get startups, we're getting share ownership. So there's different buckets where money is spent. And so it's important for the employee to understand that you can't just take base salary. Base salary is just one number in a hat sort of thing. Yeah. You have to look at the whole picture. And that's what I would tell them as well, are the kids covered? Do they have this? Do they have that? So I kind of had like a party line where I just go, okay, let's talk about your total comp statement and the guy's earnings. Yeah. So we get a fair discussion, and then they'd go to there and go, oh yeah, like really, I'm getting this. They finally the light bulb would go on, sort of thing. That, even though their base salary was not as high as they'd like, because they were talking base with the other guy, the total package was greater.
When I recognize we have about 8 minutes left, so we're gonna start wrapping things up. But I just feel, both of you are sharing some great information, and it's dawning on me and reminding me of some research that we did last year that reminded us that in turbulent times, in uncertain times, it's not necessarily what's new and exciting. It's not necessarily the snack bar in the office or the ping pong table or the nap room, but it's kind of the meat and potatoes, benefits and compensation, making sure those are really well tended to, really strategically thought out and in place to support employees that really help and kind of get people through uncertainty and turbulent times, which unfortunately I don't think we're kind of done with yet. So that's really, really interesting. So I just wanted to give each of you one last chance to, if there's anything we missed, any final thoughts or any messages you wanted to share with the audience on our topic today, because I think it's been a fantastic discussion. Catherine, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to Josh for the last word.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that before you're looking at changing your benefits program, have a conversation with people, like get their managers to sit with you at maybe one of the weekly staff meetings you have and say, listen, we're just doing some research, wanted to know what your ideas were on, what have you heard about companies X, Y, and Z that you think is a great benefit plan, so that we get a good digest of what they're thinking. And then as you do that, you'll get the conversation from different people in the room, and you'll be surprised, oh, you really thought of that, and really thought of that. So I think it's important to solicit feedback and then take that into consideration with what you're doing with your other programs from a comp perspective. Maybe you got a great profit sharing program, but if you took 1% of that profit sharing program and moved it to your benefits program, that could make a world of difference. So balancing your cash spending, I think, has to be carefully thought out and with a feedback from both sides of the party.
Awesome. Josh.
Yeah, I can't, again, I'm just echoing a lot of the stuff that Catherine's going to say here, but, asking your employees, asking various stakeholders within the business, really just trying to make sure that that benefits program aligns with your corporate ideas, right? If you're trying to be, a company that takes care of its employees and is preaching about taking care of your employees, well, then you probably should look to line up your benefits program with those sorts of messages as well. The other thing I will mention is we've kind of jumped all over the place because of the nature of our conversation here today. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a bit of a draft of an article that kind of explains what we danced around the subject of benefit philosophy quite a bit for the last hour, but I want to put something more comprehensive so the viewers today can go and actually read an article and get a bit more of a straightforward, this is what Josh was talking about today, and this is what all that sort of stuff means. And yeah, thank you very much. This was an awesome conversation. I had a great time.
Absolutely. And so thank you both. And, I think it's so appropriate that, we're having this conversation now because let's face it, payroll might manage benefits, HR might, accounting might, but I think it's an organizational concern. And, these conversations need to be had collaboratively and solutions need to be developed, by finding the synergy between those areas to really deliver the best value to employees and businesses. So, I want to thank Josh and Catherine for your time. I want to thank the audience for your time. These are busy days. There's no question everywhere. And so, giving us an hour of your time is incredibly valuable and couldn't appreciate it more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Len.
Thank you. Had a blast.
All right. Thanks so much and have a great day, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.